Hello, everyone,
I'm Carl,
and I'm Em.
and welcome to our podcast discussing all of the latest books. This is season 2, episode 1, and our book is The Friendzone by Abby Jimenez. We are so excited to have you guys back this season to listen. We have some updates on this season and our future plans, so stay tuned until the end to hear more about it. And as always, we'll be saving our ratings until the end as well.
We promise to give you all of our honest opinions on all the characters, chapters, and scenarios. We don't mean any harm to any of the authors. This is solely our opinion. As always, we promise to call them like we read them.
Period. So, for trigger warnings, there are quite a few in this book. There's none listed in the beginning. Again, we think that's an oversight that there should be. So bear with me through this list of trigger warnings because it's long. All right. There are references to infertility, a car accident, pretty graphic injuries, death, chronic illness, medical trauma, grief, emotional abuse, infidelity, gaslighting, sexism, stalking, toxic relationships, miscarriage, pregnancy, body shaming, war, depression, OCD, and sexual harassment. So, as always, make sure to take care of yourself, and spoilers will lie ahead.
So if you don't want to hear how this episode ends, please pause here, go read the book, and then come back to this episode. Are you ready to get started?
Let's get into it. Okay, so I'm going to read the excerpt on the back of the book. The blurb, my favorite word, on the back of the book says this: Kristen Peterson doesn't do drama, will fight to the death for her friends, and has no room in her life for guys who just don't get her. She's also keeping a big secret, facing a medically necessary procedure that will make it impossible for her to have children. Planning her best friend's wedding is bittersweet for Kristen, especially when she meets the best man, Josh Copeland. He's funny, sexy, never offended by her mile-wide streak of sarcasm, and always one chicken enchilada ahead of her hangry. Even her dog, Stuntman Mike, adores him. The only catch? Josh wants a big family someday. Kristen knows he'd be better off with someone else, but as their attraction grows, it's harder and harder to keep him at arm's length. The friend zone will have you laughing one moment and grabbing for tissues the next as it tackles the realities of infertility and loss with wit, heart, and a lot of sass. Also, I just want to note the cute little dog on the back of the book.
That's not how I pictured Stuntman.
Me neither. Not at all.
So, to start off, Josh and Kristen have a freak meeting that ends up resulting in them coming across each other as the best man and maid of honor in their best friend's wedding. Kristen is a small business owner with a medical issue preventing her from having kids, who is dating Tyler, also does not want to have kids, who is in the military. Josh is a firefighter who has relocated to the area, and Josh ends up helping out Kristen to help her small business to earn some extra money so he can pay for some old bills. They become really good friends who start having feelings for each other. So, the freak accident that happens at the beginning is where Josh ends up rear-ending Kristen in Brandon, which is turns out to be his best friend's truck, and she ends up spilling coffee all over herself, and so they end up in a parking lot kind of helping each other clean up. Josh has been thinking about how his ex has left him and gone with another man, and he's stuck paying for all these bills of these new appliances that were in the house that they had together, and he's really struggling, and he's kind of regretting his decision to relocate and everything, that he's not making enough money to be able to pay for those extra items. And Kristen's kind of dwelling on the fact that she has medical needs that she's needing to take care of, but she's trying to wait until after at least her best friend's wedding, which the first meeting was a little awkward, a little weird, but it was also just kind of very standoffish. And so I find it funny that they end up being put together as the best man and maid of honor. I do find it weird, though, that they were deciding to meet up at the station for Family Day to be able to have that moment to like be like, hey, this is the best man. Now here's the maid of honor. So it was a little weird there, but I did really enjoy kind of that awkwardness of hey, how you doing? Haven't met you before, even though you just rammed the back end of this truck. So
Yeah.
it was a cute little moment.
Yeah. Like, what are the odds that that would happen? And that you two would meet
Mhm.
that way. I love a little meet cute. I want to read this little quote though. She's talking to Sloan while they're at the fire department after the scene, and she's like smelling his shirt. And she says, like testosterone and cedar. And did you see him washing those dishes? He looked like Mr. February in a sexy fireman calendar. Guys like that are the exact reason why my grandmother always told me to wear clean underwear in case you get into a car accident. I thought that was so funny. And like, I don't know. I feel like from the very beginning of this, we got the sass from Kristen and we got Josh's like happy go lucky, go with the flow kind of vibe. And I just love that. And it sometimes that like starts out and then the character kind of loses that throughout the book as the writing goes on. And it just really didn't in this book. I actually really liked this book, not surprisingly. But and this is my first firefighter romance that I've ever read. So just a little tidbit.
I don't know if I have. I don't know if I read one either.
This is my first. And I might be reading another one after this one.
Well, so we end up finding out that Josh's wife has cheated on him, that apparently she didn't want kids, so Josh was trying to like change her or hoping that she eventually changed her mind. And so with that outstanding bills that he has that she's refusing to pay, he comes across in a kind of a situation where Kristen's talking about how her carpenter has quit her, and so Brandon kind of volunteers him for the job. He agrees to help build, like she builds like staircases, like doggy staircases for beds, clothing for the dogs.
Her
I don't know
business
if they
like
talk
was
about
real. I would buy from it.
same,
I don't even
same.
have small dogs,
Uh,
but I would want to buy from it and like gift it to somebody that does have a small dog.
I have medium to small. But I mean, it was a really cute idea for a business for sure. And
Yeah.
then Josh is just like, hey, I'll help out, whatever I can to be able to make some extra money. So Josh doesn't have a place to kind of build any of this because he is living out of an apartment complex. So he starts working out of her garage and they start hanging out pretty much every day. And they get closer and closer as they're talking and getting to know each other. And so she ends up with a phone call from Tyler, which is her boyfriend, which she describes as kind of like the perfect guy. And she's just not in love with him. She's just kind of accepting him because he's okay with not having kids. And of course she, because of her medical issues, cannot have them. So she talks with him about coming home, and I guess this is going to be like the first guy she's ever lived with. And so she's kind of preparing for him coming in and everything. So after her phone call with him, though, she ends up having severe cramps. And so she's like laid out on the couch whenever Josh had come inside, and she talks about going to the store and running to get some feminine products, and volunteers saying, what do you need? What do you got? I have six sisters. It's perfectly normal for me to talk about this, which she had just kind of talked about the fact that Tyler, she didn't think would be that kind of guy to do that for her. So I do kind of find that funny that Josh, without even knowing that conversation was happening internally, was like, hey, I got you what you need.
Yeah.
And so she was really, thankful. And whenever he got back, he actually ended up bringing some fries and hot fudge sundaes. He also bought some cheeseburgers and just kind of gave her a spread of like, hey, I know my sisters usually want all this kind of stuff. So you just take your pick.
This is like every
So
girl's dream about a man in her period. No, I'm just kidding.
it really is so super sweet though. I
It
mean,
is.
most men just kind of are like, no, that's cringe. I'm not going to do that for you. But he was
Yeah.
really like, I'm absolutely okay with doing that and helping you out in whatever way I can. Which honestly, whenever you're going through that, you don't want to move, you don't want to get up. So completely understandable that
Yeah.
she was like, please go do this for me. So
Yeah.
um
I love that she is like the eye candy that she gets while he's working in the garage. And she's just like,
uh-huh.
I can at least look. I don't have to touch. I
Yeah.
can still enjoy though. I think that's so funny. Like, I don't know. I love how blunt she is. Just how like straight to the point. Doesn't play around. I love that about her.
When I love how she just like completely dresses down to try to
Yeah,
deter him from making any
the
kind of
hair
moves.
curlers was
Yeah.
awful.
But I love how he totally respects that boundary though too. And I don't think even if she had dressed up, I really don't think he would have crossed that line with her just because
I agree.
he was trying to be as respectful as possible while still tiptoeing the line a little bit with
Mhm.
the flirtation and things like that though.
Yeah.
So, whenever they're hanging out and everything, they kind of make a bet that Stuntman Mike, her dog, is like a good, how does she refer to it as? You know what I'm talking about? What was the word she used?
He's a good judge of character?
No, he like can help somebody trap a female.
Oh, he's a oh my gosh, hang on. I'm gonna
She didn't call it a wingman. What was the word she had used?
hang on, I can tell you. He's a working dog.
Yeah, so he's like, attracts females to come. And
He's
so she
lady
makes a
bait.
bet
That's
that
what she
Josh
says. He's a working dog, he's lady bait.
And so Josh should take Stuntman Mike out and see if it works. And if she ends up losing the bet, you know, that's that. But then if not, then Josh was going to have to pose for pictures for her website because she needed a male model. So,
She also calls him a hunting dog because he says, "Well, what work does he do?" And he gives like examples of like this is what a working dog does. Search and rescue, protection, a police dog, service animal, a hunting dog. She's like, "Well, he is a hunting dog. He ain't hunting nothing." I think's what he says, and she's like, "He hunts women," is what she says, and he's like, "What?" And she's like, "I'm serious. He's a lady bait." And they make that bet, yeah, that take him to the store, and if you don't get a number, whatever. But I think that's so cute, like because as a woman, 1,000%, if this grown man walked into a store with this cute little dog in a backpack or in a little bag or something, or holding, just walking the dog, I would be like, "Aw," and like pay more attention to him than anybody else in the store. 1,000%. And if he was an attractive firefighter,
oh,
we're
wholeheartedly.
just turning it up even more. Like, you know what I mean? Like, absolutely, he's lady bait. But I don't know. I think it's funny that guys don't have that like concept of like, I don't know. It's so dumb.
Well, and so Brandon his best friend ends up talking to Josh, and Josh kind of expresses how he's sort of falling for her.
Hmm.
And he just basically says, hey, like, all you need to do is just be there, be her friend. And if Tyler breaks up with her, you're going to be the first to know. And if not, worst case to worst, they get married and you just kind of disappear off the face of the earth from it.
I thought it was cute,
And
first of all,
so,
that he talked to his friend about her. I don't feel like guys actually
yes,
do that, first of all. I thought that was really cute. And then I'm so glad that we get both perspectives. Loved it. Loved it, loved it, loved
I
it,
love
loved
a
it.
good old perspective in a love
Yes,
story for sure.
me too.
Well, and so Josh ends up going on a date, which he does get ready at Kristen's house. And whenever he goes to leave, Kristen has actually played a prank on Sloane. And I was just telling Carly, it kind of inspired me to want to do it for her, but I decided not to because she'd be mad about the glitter. But she sends a potato with like a congratulations on it for them getting married and then a glitter bomb. I thought it was really just kind of funny. Also, peep, there's some advertisement in there that says it's potatoparcel.com. And so I actually looked up the website and it's a legit website to
Hmm.
order potatoes and glitter bombs from. So I thought that was kind of fun.
Yeah, if any of you try it
And
out, let us know. We would like to see how it goes.
so I thought that was really kind of a fun, quirky moment. But I did think we lost that a little bit with Kristen throughout the book, which I think that may be part of like her OCD a little bit as well. So when she was feeling kind of carefree, she was able to kind of get out of that and do that. And when she wasn't, she didn't. And so I think she was also kind of high strung in a lot of situations where this was just kind of one of those moments where we didn't really get that high strungness from her. But whenever he gets back from, or he gets on his date and he is totally bored with the date, is not really interested, and he decides to call up Kristen while the woman walks to the bathroom. And he basically bails out of the date and goes home and eats pizza with her. And of course, Kristen's like flabbergasted that he would do that. And so they sit there and kind of just chit chat a little bit. And she ends up kind of telling him that somebody has attempted to break into her house. So Josh freaks out and he's like, why haven't you said anything? Why are you still here? You need to go somewhere. And she's, of course, like, no, not going to happen. I'm fine. No big deal. Kind of like nonchalant about the whole situation. And so Josh tells her, like, no argument. I'm moving in. You're not going to stay here if I'm on shift. Like, you're going to stay somewhere else. And then I'll be here for the rest of the night. So you're able to be at home, which super sweet. I do think that sort of started crossing the boundary a little bit there,
Yeah.
but understandable because, I mean, Tyler couldn't drop out of the military and come home and be there for her. So
But also he's hot, so, hot guys get away with a little more than.
that maybe too.
Also, I will say, like,
um,
she says it to Tyler too, and I was glad that it was addressed. He's kind of already been vetted because Brandon and Sloane know him. So
yeah,
he's not a stranger that she's let doing this either. I mean, they don't know each
true.
other in grave detail, but she trusts Brandon and Brandon knows him. So that also, I'm glad that was clarified and mentioned because some of these books will just throw a random stranger in there and that's what happens anyways and they don't really know them. They could be the burglar for all we know, inserted themselves in your life. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But this book wasn't like that. It's not like that.
Well, I really love the scene though whenever they were living together and Kristen like freaks out over a spider and
Mhm.
she's like, I'm leaving forever. And he's like, you're literally going to leave for a spider, but not for someone attempting to break into your home.
Yeah.
And I think the sentence he says is like, I don't feel like your priorities are straight, like, or something like that. And she was like, no, I feel like my priorities are straight.
Yeah.
But they kind of end up having some conversations over the time of them living together that end up evolving where Josh kind of makes some subtle comments like, I want a baseball team of kids. Like, I left Celeste because she didn't want to have kids. Just kind of like little comments that really to Kristen opens up her eyes that they can't ever be a thing, even if she wanted it to be a thing, because she's not able to have them. So she just kind of has that line that's she's not willing to cross because she doesn't want to get her hopes up and end up being heartbroken over it. But they do end up deciding to TP Sloane and Brandon's house, and they have this cute little moment where they're acting like they're in like some military op training, and they go and TP the house, and they end up he ends up giving her a piggyback ride back to the car. And it was just really, really cute little moment between the two of them to have. So I
It is.
really enjoyed it.
It is really cute. I like that she later on confesses that to Sloane, and Sloane is like, "We know.
Yeah.
You didn't get it past us."
Well, and she does consistently talk about with herself as well as with Sloane about how Tyler kind of starts fading as like a memory. And so, and I don't know if it would have been any different if Tyler was actually physically there for her or not, but she basically talks about how he, you know, is only able to call whenever he can. And even whenever they do have conversations, she does miss him, but it's not like a longing like, oh my god, I can't live without you any longer or anything like that, where every time Josh goes on a 2 hour or 2 day shift or anything like that, she misses him consistently the entire time. And has almost this longing. And I think even at one scene she talks about how the fact that she thought about going up to the firehouse to just see him for a moment, and she talked about, I think, one time driving by the firehouse because she had missed him so bad, where with Tyler it wasn't really like that draw. And Sloane was also really upset with her because she felt like she was settling because he just fit what she needed or felt like she needed instead of like what she deserved.
Yeah, and there's a little quote that I want to read that references that. So this is in Kristen's point of view, and she says, I just needed Tyler to come home. That's it. I needed him to come home, come back into my life, and blot out the sun. I needed an eclipse. Josh looked over at me and gave me his stunning dimpled smile, and I felt my disloyal heart reach out for him. Yes, I needed an eclipse, but then I'd just be in the dark, wouldn't I? Which I thought was funny considering we just also read Eclipse, but like she's saying like Josh is the sun, like legit like what her world like or is orbiting around at this point. Like that's the analysis. So it's interesting how quickly it happened too. I will say though, I did really appreciate that neither one of them crossed that line while she was actually with Tyler. I did appreciate that.
Yes.
I don't like cheating of any kind in any book. I think it's I don't think it adds to a plot story. I think it ruins it. So I did appreciate that.
Well, and whenever they do go to the party for Sloan and Brandon, there's kind of some a little bit of like flirtatious eyes where they're kind of like looking back and forth at each other, and Sloan kind of points that out. And so Kristen decides it's probably time to tell her, everything that's been going on with her medically. So she takes her to the bathroom, which she kind of wanted to keep it a secret from her to not ruin the weeks leading up to the wedding, which is understandable. However, Sloan is really upset. Like, I would have gone to the doctor's appointments with you, I would have been there for you. She admits that she's having a hysterectomy because of how bad her periods had gotten. And apparently, she had some tumors that had embedded in the lining. She had gotten anemia, that the birth control and IUD that she had put in wasn't helping anything. And so she was just really out of options to make herself feel better. And she also had different tumors and stuff that were pushing against her organs, causing it hard for her to breathe and things like that. And so, you know, she's pretty upset and everything regarding the situation, but Sloan just kind of is very supportive, of really good friend. Like, I'll carry baby for you. I will do whatever you need me to do to be there for you. And she's still like, but I think you should still try with Josh. And which I guess Sloan has pretty predominantly mentioned multiple times that she can't really stand Tyler because of seeing them together. She could tell it wasn't really love. And so she kept asking her, like, why are you settling? Why are you settling? And so Kristen does end up explaining to her that the reason why she doesn't want to get with Josh was just because he's made multiple comments about how he wants kids and she can't provide that for him. And so I really enjoy, because I do struggle with a little bit of OCD. And so one of the things that I also do is do pros and cons list of everything inside my head. And so she does mention that, you've done a spreadsheet in your head of the pros and cons of, why you should be with Tyler, why you shouldn't be with Josh. And all your pros are basically logistics, and it's not really love or feelings or infatuation or anything like that. So I appreciated kind of an accurate representation of that, because that is something that I do often.
Yeah, no, I wholeheartedly agree. And I think even further than just him wanting kids, I think like there are comments that like he doesn't want to adopt, he doesn't want to foster, he wants them biologically, and not does he just want one kid, but he wants 10, or you know what I mean? Like it's a grand scheme, and so far to one side that she knows she can't give him that, so she doesn't want to limit him and make him settle either. And like that's part of it also. And so I want to read what she actually says to Sloan in the bathroom because actually I got a little teary eyed reading it. I got a little emotional. So Sloane says to have an honest conversation with him, and she says no. She says, "Do you think discussing my deficiencies as a woman with a man that I'm half in love with is something I want to put myself through? Why would I tell him, Sloane? To humiliate myself? To have him look at me with pity? Or worse, to get rejected? There's not going to be any rejection because I won't be making an offer. There's no point. I'd like to spare myself this one indignity if that's okay with you. Do I have feelings for Josh? Yes, I do. Okay? He's wonderful, and I hate that I can't pursue it, but I can't. I can never guarantee that I can give him kids. In fact, I can almost guarantee that I can't. I know how this goes, and I'm not going there. This isn't a man who wants one or two kids, Sloan. He came from a huge family. You know what he told me the other day? He said he wants a whole baseball team of kids. It's all he wants, and it's the one thing I can't give him. Not really. Not in any way that's close to what he has planned for himself. He couldn't sit with me in the bathroom and watch the little pink line show up on the stick, or put his hand in my belly and feel his baby kicking. He wouldn't be able to come with me to ultrasounds or hold my hand while I push. This is a man who wants to be a daddy, Sloan, and I'm never going to be a mommy. It just is what it is. It was really sad. And so I think too, like, there's a context where if Kristen didn't want kids, there'd be a different conversation with whether Josh or Tyler or whatever. But she does want kids, she just can't have kids. So that
Yeah.
that little scene right there of like that, it's so heart wrenching. Like thinking about for her the fact that she wants them to and she can't. She physically can't do it, and it's so sad. And this is probably the first scene that I got emotional, and I cried later on too. But I did cry a little bit in that scene. But Sloane, I think Sloane was always also like almost like feeling the emotions for Kristen because Kristen sort of like turned off that side of her brain is how she like says it, a velociraptor or something's in her brain. which what
Mhm.
I thought was I've heard, like, other references like that, like a monster in your brain. I've never heard a dinosaur. That was a new one for me, but that was interesting. But Sloane sort of, like, feels the emotions for her, and she kinda pretty much tells her, like, "You'll have to adjust. Like, the dream you had of the future of us looking like this is not how we're gonna look even as friends." So, it's just really interesting to see it how it plays out and, like, honestly and then, like, how the story ends. Like, it's just because you don't really know. That's kinda part of the problem, right?
Yeah,
You don't know how Sloane doesn't know, and what all these sort of things that it just thing play into life and, like, how everything can go completely wrong or completely right or completely 180 and it still be right or whatever. It's just interesting to see.
absolutely. Well, and speaking of wrong and right, whenever they leave the party, Kristen and Josh go and take Sloane's car to tacos. And Josh is just absolutely shocked at the fact that Kristen is taking them to this rundown part of town and she's paying
Skid
off this
Row
homeless
is
guy. Yeah, to watch her car for her. And he is just completely concerned that her ways of wrong and right is completely jaded.
so funny.
And she's like, "No, it's just absolutely fine. Like we're tight, we're good." So she goes get some tacos from this taco stand, and they end up eating. They talk about kind of just different things with their life, and Josh ended up finally telling her that the neighbor was actually his kids were the ones that were in the backyard and stuff, and I guess they were trying to break in to steal some liquor. So they were talking about how they were going to leave, and I do want to read
They're so
Josh's
dumb, by
perspective.
the way. I just wanna say that. What the heck?
True. It's a good way to get killed if you were trying to break into somebody's house for sure.
Just to steal some liquor, and then you left your cigarette butts in the yard? Like,
Yeah.
I wasn't that dumb at that age, I know that. I mean, I was probably dumb in certain ways, but not that dumb.
Well, I do really like whenever they're talking, they have this scene where Josh ends up saying she was like a unicorn, a mythical creature, an honest, no drama woman who didn't bullshit and drank beer and cussed and didn't care what people thought of her. She was a unicorn tucked in the body of an attractive woman with a great ass, and I couldn't have her. So I should just stop thinking about it. So he keeps actively trying to convince himself that
Yeah.
she's good, but I can't have her, so I've got to stop thinking about her. They do
I
lay
love the way
down
he
kind
talks
of
about
have
her. He's
absolutely.
so obsessed with her. I love it.
Absolutely. He is insanely obsessed with her. And it's like a respectable amount too. It's not like talking like trash about her, talking like
Like
she's
Sean.
like property. Yeah.
I didn't
I
like
mean,
Sean.
he's very respectable about it.
Yes, he is.
Well, and they do have a moment where they're kind of sitting there talking and Kristen says, "You know what this feels like?" And he says, "That scene in Pulp Fiction when," and she says, "Comfortable silences." When Mia Wallace says, "That's when you know you found somebody really special. When you can just shut the fuck up for a minute and comfortably stare in silence." She makes a finger gun at me and says, "Disco." I just
It's
love
so
that.
it's so cute.
Well, and so Josh takes that as a perfect opportunity to ask Kristen why she's not answering Tyler's phone calls whenever they're together.
Mm.
Which of course anytime that so she basically just says I'm not going to have this conversation. Let's go. So they get in the car and of course the car won't start and they end up having to call a tow truck and of course a forced proximity situation happens where the tow truck driver is like, "Hey, I got my big dog. You guys have to share a seat." And so Kristen has
I've
to sit
got my
on
big
Josh's
dog. Y'all
lap.
gotta share a seat. It is wild.
Like of all things they could think of, they could have just been like, "We only have two seats in this truck,"
Yeah.
or something along that lines. But no,
No.
I've got my giant dog in the car, so you have
And
to.
then they just get in and there's his dog. I just picture like how
Yeah,
awkward it really would be. I literally had to ride a tow truck 2 or so years ago, and at, like, a 45-minute ride, I was, like, driving to work and my car broke down, and I had to get back to where I actually lived, and it was the most awkward thing I've probably done in my entire life, and, like, I just remember sitting there and being, like, super quiet and, like, on my phone and being like, "When am I gonna get back?" So, like, I feel like it would be awkward, and they're over there just, like, about to go at it. Like, what?
yeah.
It's just weird, I don't know.
Well, Kristen even made the comment like if Tyler wasn't a thing, like she would be all over him in that tow truck because it was just such a forced situation where they were having to touch, and
I will
she kind of
say,
avoided that up to that point.
yeah, I will say though, like you sitting on his lap in the car, it was a little dramatic.
Hmm.
I mean, I'm all for it, but
However, we're talking about weeks of sexual tension happening, and
true,
like that was
true,
like their first time of like actually being able to like touch and like do anything. So like that buildup of like
true.
they've talked about multiple
It's like
times how they were so
foreplay
attracted to each
almost.
other. Yeah. So after a voicemail from Kristen's boyfriend admitting he was re-enlisting, Kristen realizes it's over and decides to have a friends with benefits situation with Josh because he wants kids she can't give him. Josh agrees that he knows there's something more there and hopes that it will evolve further. After Kristen's ex shows up, Josh is worried with a relationship may unfold into, especially after he learns Tyler proposed. Kristen finally admits to Josh why she can't be with him. So as soon as they basically pull up, it seems like Kristen jumps out of the car and takes off walking to their house. And as she does, she ends up pulling out her cell phone and gets the message from Tyler, which he'd been trying to call her for several days, and she doesn't answer. So he just decides to leave her voicemail that he is reenlisted. And she had told him that if he decided to reenlist, that they were going to be over. So she basically took it as a declaration that they were done. And so she basically goes to the front door, slings open the door, and Josh is coming down the walkway, and she just jumps into his arms and then literally jumps into the sheets with him.
Mm,
So right before they
jumps.
have sex, Kristen decides to let him know like it's a friends with benefits situation. It can't be anything more. Josh doesn't exactly agree. He just kind of lets things continue to happen.
He just like throws her
And
on the bed.
yeah, as they describe, had the best night of sex of their life. And they wake up in the morning and Josh is cuddling with Kristen. And I do want to talk about because I know in reading this you were giggling. And I know for a fact that you were, is while they were sleeping together and he pulls down his pants and she's like, that's the most beautiful penis I've ever seen. I knew you were giggling so
Such an
hard.
ick. It's also the like, it's so big it won't fit.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that doesn't exist, because it does. But statistically, the majority of men are not that big that it won't
And
fit. And also, you're pushing out a baby. A lot will fit down there. Just saying. We talk about it like it's literally built to push out a newborn. And you're going to sit here and say it won't fit. Is it a pumpkin?
true.
I mean,
True.
is it a watermelon? I you better give me some more details because that doesn't make sense. However, I had to like ignore that so I could enjoy the rest of the
Yeah.
scene and be like, oh, they're
Yeah.
finally doing it, whatever. But yeah, some of that language I thought that is the dumbest thing. You can tell when people have written smut for quite some time and when they just sort of dabble in it.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah, for sure. So Josh and her end up kind of cuddling overnight, and
I love
he,
that she was like, "Oh no, you got to go," and he's like, "Oh no, go to sleep."
mm-hmm.
Excuse me?
Well, and he kind of was like, you've already made me lose my sleep,
Mhm.
so I'm not going anywhere. But he does end up going to work, and she does kind of miss him, so she does go hang over at Sloane's house. But at the same time, Brandon is actually, I think it's his boss, isn't it? Josh's boss, or at least one of the like people next level up in his ranking or something in the firehouse. I don't know how that works.
No, so Brandon's not the boss. Oh, what's his name?
He's like the shift leader or something, right?
No, the shift leader is hang on. Sean and Brandon, and then there's one other guy, and the other guy I think is the shift leader. Hang on, where's his name? Javier. The fire station captain
Okay.
is Javier. And then there's Brandon, Sean, and now Josh. But yeah, no, Javier is the fire station captain.
Okay.
He's the
So
one
when they
married that
he
minds his business. Sean
gotcha.
is the pervert.
So Josh ends up going in for his shift, and as he does kind of admit to Brandon that he had hooked up with Kristen, and Brandon just kind of nonchalant was like, well, I can't say that really surprised me. And Josh ends up kind of going into the fact that, like, I like her a lot. You know, we get along. The weird thing is, I can tell she likes me too, but something's kind of off. And they talk, of course, about the sex and everything and how good it was.
And Sean's over here just like, nah, dude, she's just not into you. It's like, Sean, shut
Yes.
up. Also, what you're
He
probably
does say that multiple times, though, too.
yeah.
So he ends up going back to Kristen's house after his shift, and she kind of gets a little bit upset and ends up storming off to Sloane's house. And she ends up kind of admitting to Sloane that she had slept with him, and of course Sloane's like what happened with Tyler, and she's like, Tyler and I broke up. She says, actually, Tyler and I broke up. I slept with Josh. It was fucking incredible. His penis is glorious, and I'm dick whipped, and I'm in love with him. I don't know what to do. I think I fucked up. And she tells him, like, I like him so much, Sloan, and he's all sweet and wants to hang out with me. He asked me if we could be exclusive, and I told him no, that it's purely a sex thing for me, which it's totally not. But what else can it be? And so basically Sloane's like, well, I mean, just let it happen. Like, it could be involved in something else. And Sloane's very like, come on,
Sloan
just
is like,
accept
if you
it.
don't get with him, girl, I'm tired of this.
She does say that too at the end. But she talks about like how sexy he is and how she's just absolutely like in love with his body and him. And she just talks about, how miserable, it is, the fact that her body, is doing what it's doing to her. And so as she's crying to Sloane, Josh ends up walking in, and he's just coming over to hang out with Brandon. And he thinks that because he's trying to pressure Kristen to be together, that she's upset because she's actually missing Tyler. And so he kind of just decides he's going to leave and just let her have her moment missing Tyler. And what he doesn't realize is this actually has nothing to do with Tyler. It has everything to do with him, which I do think that was a tasteful miscommunication trope touch on.
Yeah,
It wasn't like blatantly like, oh, you should have said something to me or anything like that. Like, it was very tastefully done. It wasn't too much, and it was appropriately like where a normal person would have had that miscommunication about what it was about,
I agree.
instead of like, just tell them already kind of situation. So it did make it a little bit better. So Josh ends up kind of teasing a little bit with Kristen and says, I heard sleeping next to a man every night can regulate your period, and kind of teases it. So he's talking about, sleeping with her, and they end up actually having sex. And the next morning they wake up, and Kristen has realized she forgot to set an alarm to meet her mother. So she's hurrying around getting dressed. And as she is, her mother actually ends up showing up. And so Josh answers the door because Kristen doesn't respond when he yells down the hallway to tell her that her mom's there. And so,
I love him like getting in the
uh,
shower with her, and she's like, "No, like I've got to get this done. Go away." And he's like, "Dude, it's one shower. Like, do your shower and then I'll shower. Whatever." But like,
yeah.
what is the deal? She's like, "No, you don't understand. My mother's coming." And he's like, "I can't meet your mom." And she's like, "No, you can't meet my mom." I do like that her mom though ends up inviting him to brunch. I like that. Kind of set
Well,
us
and
up to.
her mom's also still under the impression she's still with Tyler, and that's pretty much the first thing that she does tell her mom whenever she runs around the corner and sees that Josh is there talking to her mom. And she's like, actually, Tyler won't be coming. We actually broke up.
Yeah.
And so her mom, though, how she asked Josh, I didn't like. She was like, well, you could have told me beforehand because I made a reservation for 3. So, Josh, I guess you're coming along because I have 3 spots reserved, which I think she already knew something was kind of happening at that point. She just kind of was hoping to, I guess, force that out of them, but she kind of did it the wrong way.
She did everything the wrong way. I don't know who she thought she was, but
Mm-mm.
I'm glad that Josh was like, first of all, that Josh defended her Love that. But then also was like, "Hey, we're going. Like, you're not gonna sit here and keep taking this." And, like, got her out of her
Yeah.
shell and, like, kinda shook her and was like, "Hello? This is not even you." I really liked that. And I love that, like, he knows things about her. I love how much he pays attention. I love how much he knows. So, like, for example, like, the little breakfast thing and knowing that she has to eat and, like, little things like that. I loved it. It doesn't feel realistic,
Well,
but it's really cute.
well, and I know that like just basically like her mom's like blaming her for everything that happened with her and Tyler. Her
Mhm.
mom's basically like degrading her for owning her own business instead of going to Harvard. And she talked about her piano career that it could have been, which honestly I feel like owning your own business would have been better than a piano career. I mean, as far as like, because you worked on something hard from the ground up and, you know, like built this thing. And like with piano, I mean, I'm not familiar with it, so please don't take offense if you do something with that, but I don't feel like that's something that you can like build up to some point until like maybe like a performance. And then it's kind of just that, which of course you could build a career in music,
Mhm.
but I just feel like that is just purely on talent rather than the hard work and blood, sweat, and tears that could have been put into like building a business,
Yeah.
which I've played musical instruments, so please don't take offense to that whatsoever. Because I mean, I worked really hard to learn the music and things like that, but I just feel like building a business is really a whole lot of guts and things like that. That the risk it takes a lot more for sure.
I definitely think it's different. I think it's a different career path. It's a different way of doing, like, the risk I would agree is higher when you're starting your own business because there's multiple ways to be successful with music. Like, there's not just one specific route. There's multiple options, multiple opportunities, and whereas with your business, it either succeeds or it fails. There's not a whole lot of wiggle room there. And considering the health issues that she had, she was able to work from home to be able to maintain that business, and that was so important
Yeah.
to her, and her mom just ignored that. And so I didn't play an instrument, but I would agree that I think starting a business is much harder than doing music successfully in any, honestly, particular
Yeah.
format. But I'm not saying that doing music is not difficult. I'm sure you also have a difficulty in certain ways doing that, but I do think starting a business is a notable thing, and the way it didn't really tell us what she made, but Josh saying that he's a firefighter and she makes more than him, so she makes a decent wage based off her business. Thought that was a little nice to have that kind of context too from him. But yeah.
Well, I think the comparisons too with like where they live was also kind of played into that, where, Kristen lived in a nice home with multiple garages, where Josh was in an apartment struggling to get by kind of situation, kind of reflected not outright with that, but kind of like just put into perspective a little bit about it.
Well, and part of the reason she was in the house is because Tyler, they agreed on that house to move in
Yeah.
together, and then he was in that apartment partially because of his ex-girlfriend keeping all the debt on him or whatever, so that played into it too. But I agree, like, that context, this, like, picture of different living styles, different incomes, whatever, I agree, that was, nice to see.
Well, and I really appreciate whenever Josh pulls her aside after they leave and it's like, hey, nothing she just said is true. And of course, she's going into which with OCD you do hyperfixate on some things. So of course she is hyperfixating on her mom's words and like, no, it is true, like she's right. And so Josh starts kind of making little bits of jokes and things like that about her mom and says that she's similar to Meryl Streep from Devil's Wear Prada, and she
Yes,
kinda
that was
chuckles and
hilarious.
kind of agrees, and I think that by him doing stuff like that, it kinda brought her out of that hyperfixation and that kinda spiral that you could go on whenever you have OCD.
I totally
It's okay.
agree, and I thought it was hilarious that he referenced The Devil Wears Prada. I thought that was so funny.
Well, and he starts asking her a little bit about the facts that he learned from her mom about her getting into Harvard and that she had decided to go to law school and had dropped out,
I was
and
so
that,
giddy when she was like, "I haven't played in so long, but, like, I would play for him if he asked."
yes, I did love that. However, I hate that she didn't end up playing for him.
Yeah, we never even got that.
No. So I do really want to read this quote because I kind of found it funny that it kind of related back to Twilight again as well. But she said, Josh was my drug, my dealer, and that really toxic friend who was also always pushing you into breaking your sobriety. And it kind of related back to that, you're my own personal brand of heroin that we just got through reading. So I kind
Yep.
of found that a little bit funny. But I also really love the scene that she follows up with, and she says, "He was like that little puppy that you swear you'll never sleep in, that'll never sleep in the bed. It's so effing cute, and you have to be the pack leader and lay down the law. Then it starts crying from the laundry room, and you end up giving in the very first night." And he asks, "What are you thinking about?" And she says, "Drug dealers and puppies in laundry rooms." And
Yeah.
he kind of laughs and says, "Of course you are." But she ends up learning a little bit about more about his life and his family as well. And he talks about, what he wishes out of, a marriage. And he says, marrying your best friend, you marry your best friend, and at family gatherings, you deal with your shitty relatives together. You laugh about it. You have each other's backs, share looks, and text each other from across the room when nobody else is, or everybody else is being an a-hole. And nobody else really matters because you have your own universe. And I love that. I love that concept so much.
Me too. And that's what I want. I
Well,
had that quote ready up, waiting to for whenever we got there.
and so we do get to the part where they're back in their pace where they're just building stairs, hanging out, and one day she is actually inside and Josh is out in the garage, and some guy pulls up that Josh is pretty confident right off the bat is Tyler. So Tyler asks for them, Kristen and him, to go somewhere and talk. So they end up going to a diner. Which also, before we get to the diner, she is dressed how she normally is when she hangs out with Josh. And Tyler looks at her and he's like, "Are you going to change?" And she's like, "Absolutely not. I will be wearing this to dinner. Don't care." And so they get up, they go and leave. And while they're sitting there having dinner, he starts asking him questions, or he starts asking her questions. And she gets a backbone, which seems like the first time she's really done that, which kind of seems to surprise Tyler a little bit as well, because she's starting to say, like, "You don't even know who I am. You have taken me to a restaurant, which I don't like. You are asking me to dress how I don't like. You're asking me to do things that I don't like, you know."
I will say, Josh has this thought that I want to read. It's so hot. This woman was mine. She was mine, not his. Why couldn't he have stayed away from her? Let her just get over him. But then I realized the truth. She wasn't mine. She never was. I'm hers. And it's not the same thing. I also, like, I loved it, but I also felt bad for him simultaneously.
Mhm.
But I wholeheartedly agreed. Like,
It gets like a little possessive a little
it
bit whenever
does.
Tyler shows up
But
too.
but then it's like, "Oh, wait a minute, like, I belong to her, she doesn't belong to me," and I was like, "Okay, alright." But I totally agree that, like, he takes her to a restaurant she doesn't even like, he wants to do this, like, grand thing for a proposal, like, all these things that she wouldn't like. One of my favorite things, though, is when she gets home and she tells him this, or at the like, when they get to the bar or whatever. It might be in the car on the way to the bar, actually, and Josh says, "What a schmuck. Like he messed that up. You wouldn't like that." She was like, "What do you mean? Well, what would I like?" And I think it's like they're talking about the ring in particular. And he tells
Mhm.
her like and she is so shook that he knows her so well and this guy that she's literally dated for 2 years and was about to move in with doesn't. And again, like I said in just that last episode, like to be loved is to be known. And so I just love how well he knows her. It's
Mhm.
so good. Like, that's one of my favorite parts of this book, and gosh, can you imagine if we hadn't gotten the dual perspective? This book would be awful.
Yes.
Because Kristen is so pessimistic, we would never get anything good.
Well, and the actual quote he says is, "You'd want to pick your own ring. You'd probably say something like, 'I'm the one who has to look at it for the next 50 years, and I would have taken you to buy it instead of just springing it on you.'" And she asked, "How did you know that I wouldn't like my ring sprung on me?" He says, "The only thing you like sprung on you are snacks, and you have an opinion about everything. You also are really practical. You'd probably pick something reasonable. No diamonds. I'm thinking an etched band. Nothing that wouldn't need to be repaired or cleaned that you'd have to take off doing the dishes." something only the two of you would get. And she thinks he knows me. He knows me better than I know myself. And she says, I like that you don't do that guy thing where you try and solve all my problems. Guys do that. Sometimes we just want to complain. That's it. We don't want advice, just want you to listen. You're a good listener. And
No,
I
literally,
think it's
like, if every man ever could just listen to that, that's what we want. We just want you to shut up.
true.
I can solve my own problems. I just want to discuss them and rant about them to you, but then I'll solve it. Don't worry.
Well, and so they go out and they go to karaoke and they have like a really fun, carefree time as well at the same time. And it kind of gets ruined whenever Josh kind of asks, like, so what's wrong with Tyler? Like, why not him? And Kristen says it's because he doesn't want kids. And Josh says, oh, yeah, that's definitely a deal breaker then, thinking that she wants to have kids or can have kids. And so she ends up deciding, like, I've got to cut him loose. I'm not going to marry Tyler, but I'm also gonna cut him loose as well. So she just kind of disappears for a little bit. And so Sean, Brandon, and Josh go to Vegas for a bachelor trip, while it seems like Kristen and Sloan and some of their friends go to like a
A
kind of a
spa.
spa weekend.
Mhm.
And so Brandon and Josh the entire time are trying to contact Sloan and Kristen and kind of stay in contact with them. And so Sean gets annoyed and grabs their phones and chucks them into the fountain.
What
And
an
so
idiot, first of all. But don't
absolutely.
don't you love that Kristen was keeping up with Josh through Sloan and Brandon secretly?
Absolutely.
And he knew
Well, I
about it,
love
but he didn't
too
call her out on it?
Well, I love too that they actually called Sean out, like, "You're buying us a new phone." Like,
Absolutely.
that's for sure happening
Them things are too
because,
expensive. You
uh
throw my phone in the water, you're gonna replace it.
no, it was like an iPhone or something.
Can you how much money he gotta be able to make, though, to go buy 2 brand new iPhones like that? That's kinda crazy.
Well, and why would he not just, like, slip them in his pocket or
That's
something?
what
I
I was
mean,
thinking. Why
that's
not
like
turn them off and put them in your pocket?
yeah.
That was my exact thought. Turn it off, put it in your pocket. Why throw it away?
But I really do appreciate that she's, like, keeping tabs on them and stuff, but she kinda gets a little bit worried, but then gets a anonymous phone call, and she ends up answering it, and it's Josh, drunk, but
Drunk
he
as a
had gone to
skunk.
uh-huh. But he'd gone to the business center of the hotel to call her. And first of all, he memorized her phone number. And second of all, like he'd gone out of his way to find a phone to call her, which honestly, why is there not a phone in the room? But I absolutely loved that. And he also was kind of giving an update, like Brandon is like passed out drunk, so that's why he hasn't contacted Sloan because I'm sure she's concerned. But they have like this cute little conversation, and even Kristen pointed out that Josh has got a little bit more swagger to him whenever they're talking and flirting, which honestly it just sounds like he just doesn't have that barrier anymore of,
Yeah.
holding back. And so they kind of sexually flirt with each other a little bit. He talks about how like he'd take advantage of her if she was there. And he talks about how she's his unicorn. And he says, when you find a unicorn, you marry her. I think about you all the time. And then he asks, like, do you ever think about me? And she says, whenever I'm horny. And she ends up further admitting after he admits that he has to throw up. She admits, when you're not with me, it feels like I'm hollow. I wonder what you're doing, who you're with. I read your text 100 times. I wanted to tell you I missed you back, but I can't say that stuff to you. And I just lost my entire place because it just tripped out.
Phone call is so cute, though. Like, oh. The fact, though, that she thinks he won't remember it the next day is hilarious to me. And so
Yes.
she says things, she wouldn't have said otherwise. But she should have been careful with that because he remembered.
Well, and so whenever he gets back, he does remember it and comes over to her house, I guess to declare his love to her or something, and ends up finding out that there's some guy at her house with a truck. So he decides to go home instead of showing up there.
No,
And
literally, the jealousy is so insane. The assumption that she's got some other man over there, sir.
after she just admitted her love to him like a
And
few minutes or a few
she
days
was
before.
loyal to Tyler the entire time and never once crossed
Yeah.
that line. And you haven't seen her go out with any other guys. I think he was just feeling real insecure at this point and like just so
Mm.
uncertain that it just his own, insecurities probably from his past relationship played into this.
Yeah.
But also like I would have just knocked on that door. Answer the door then with this man cuz I need to know. You know what I'm saying?
Well, it turns out it's her carpenter, Miguel, has
Who
come back to her, like,
wasn't invited.
yeah, just randomly shows up. So they end up deciding to go out again, and Josh again is kind of pressing on why they're not together. And I do really like the comment, which honestly I imagine this type of banter in a relationship that you have for sure, because like you just sometimes throw it out there. But she makes the comment, you're my favorite monkey to throw poo with. And his response to that was just, then why aren't we together? And I'm just like, yeah.
It's a good
But
question.
anyway, so she ends up getting up and walking away. And while she does, she goes to the bar, and there's a guy that comes up to her, and she's asking him to basically or leave her alone. And he continues like doing it. And again, this is why I'm saying that I imagine you as Kristen pretty much, because she says, "What is it about the look on my face that is encouraging you right now?" And he just like, she like gets up and like leaves or whatever, and he grabs her arm, and so Josh comes over and like pins him down to the bar and tells him not to touch her again. And so it was just really funny, but then she tries to get away from Josh, and she runs to the bathroom, and he ends up picking her up and hauling her over his shoulders like she's some kind of like fire hose, and takes her outside.
I
And
gotta tell
of
you,
course, again,
the moment she turned away from him, my brain said, if he doesn't sling her over his shoulder, this is not a firefighter romance.
well, but the comments that she says afterwards is you totally again. And even though I know you would have loved it in that moment, you would have like had some kind of comeback at the same time. But she says, "Don't ever do that again. I'm not your effing possession." And he's like, "No, you're not my anything, are you? I'm not allowed to touch you as long as I act, or I'm only allowed to touch you as long as I act like it doesn't mean anything." So then she starts spitting back at him like, you have all these other women, like it shouldn't be that big of a deal. And he's like, there is no other women. I've been going home alone, hanging out until I could come see you again.
That
And that kind of shocks her. And he's like, no, of course I haven't, because I'm in love with you. And it's just it's such a good scene.
is such
But
a good
she ends up kind of blowing it up whenever he's just like, please just tell me, like, we can't be together, like we have such good times together, like why can we not be together? And I do not like that she threw it in his face, like, you're trying to change the rules like you try to change Celeste. I didn't like that.
no, I didn't either.
um and then she ends up saying like, the reason why I'm like this is because I can't have children. Like I can't have children. And he did freeze, which freaked her out. But she also had to give him time to process that information.
I agree.
Um, but she decides to run. And in running, she does end up giving him a few days and decides to come back to give him the full story of why they can't be together. And so she talks to him about how she's having a hysterectomy, how she's been trying to do treatment, and that infertility is one of the results from her situation. And she's like, I'm not telling you this so that it opens a discussion of whether or not we could be together. I'm just telling you why I can't do this. And he basically admits all of his feelings again for the 18th other time. And a call ends up coming in the meantime. And so he asks her to stay and that he would be right back. And so she waits for him as he goes out on the call. So Josh gets a heartbreaking call to a motorcycle accident in which he discovers it's his best friend. Josh and Kristen put their emotions aside to be there for their best friends as Brandon's in a coma. One night, Brandon has a stroke and is declared brain dead. Sloan and Josh have a hard time with his passing, and Kristen is forced herself to keep the pieces together until one day Sloan snaps at her and sends her home. Kristen finds out that in the time that she's been holding everything together, Josh has made the decision and done the research to prove to Kristen that he knew what being with her would entail. After proposing to her, they discover that Kristen has been pregnant since their first time together, and they both get the family they always wanted.
Yay! Also, though, like, this section of the book, super tragedy, super happy ending for one person. Well, one
Yeah,
couple. Like, there's so much to unpack in this part of the book.
absolutely. I think the hardest part of reading it was the fact that, first of all, didn't know Brandon was a motorcycle driver, so that kind of threw me for a loop. But whenever he does show up and Josh gets on the scene and he realizes it's Brandon, like I really thought like the description of his feelings and like his emotions and like his trying to put aside like the medical training versus his personal feelings and stuff like that was really really difficult, and it was really hard to read. Like I felt it was very, I could feel myself almost feeling like what he would have been feeling. So I thought that was really good writing in that aspect.
Oh, yeah, I wholeheartedly agree. I had to pause a little bit and I had to wipe my tears, come back to it. It was really sad. And, like, in general, motorcycle accidents can be so bad, just in general, even
Mhm.
just little bump and runs here and there, not even necessarily if someone's drunk and running a red light. And so, like, like, being able to keep their cool, like, I would have wanted to attack that woman, like,
Mhm.
and
Well, I think the only reason why they didn't is because they knew that extra seconds is what they needed to help save Brandon. So I think that was really a part of why they didn't.
yeah, no, absolutely, and also obviously professionalism, but I
At that point, though, I think it went out the window with that.
I I will say, I was a little disappointed that she gave us a little bit of hope with Brandon's condition and then killed him
Mhm.
anyways. That made me really sad for
Yeah.
Sloane. So I was reading this yesterday morning in my bed to finish it up, or maybe Friday night. Anyways, and I literally sat up and was like, "She's not gonna kill the side character, right? She's not gonna kill a side character. He doesn't even really even matter. Why do we kill him?" And like was like rambling, trying to rationalize whether or not Brandon was going to die. And then when he did die, I was like, "He's just a side character. He's not. This is not his story. Why are we doing this?" Like, not because I was mad. I mean, not because I was like, no one cares about Brandon and it didn't affect me, but because I loved Brandon and wanted Brandon to survive. So, like, the fact that even a little side character's death like that took such a toll, like, she wrote it so well. I can't, gotta give her
I
credit for
think
that.
the biggest thing for me was not really it. I mean, the accident was upsetting and it was, hard to read that. But I think the worst part was the fact that Kristen had to be the one to break all the bad news to her best friend. And like, I just kept picturing,
You're gonna make me cry. I did too. Because you just got engaged, so like your wedding will come up. And I did too. I kept picturing it like, oh my God, what if I was Kristen and you were Sloane and I had to tell you
yeah.
that? Like I wouldn't. Oh God.
Well, especially whenever she said the line, I think it was something along the lines of like, I watched the life like leave out of her. Ooh,
Also,
it got me.
like her every day, like having to be able to even get Sloane out of the bed to like feed her and like every single
Yeah.
thing. And then I'm not gonna lie to you, my heart kind of hurt for Sloane that like her and Josh got her happy ever after so close to the tragedy, and then
Yeah.
like the wedding and all that kind of stuff. And like I get it, like you can't. Josh had to lock it down, and Sloane was supportive of that. So like I get that, but it also hurt my heart so much for Sloane to have to watch that
Yeah.
and be a part of that while she literally like day to day couldn't even function, take care of herself. It was so sad.
Well, and Josh kind of, I think, I don't really know. We don't really know the perspective of his communication with Sloan whenever she had. So, kind of backtracking, but whenever Sloan kicked Kristen out of the house after she was there taking care of her and told her to go back home. And so she ends up going back home and finding like a binder of all this research and testing that Josh had done to kind of prove to her that like he has fully figured out exactly what this all entails being with her and stuff, which is super sweet because that's kind of whenever you're in that OCD mindset, that's you need the kind of logic to be able to get
Yes.
that. But like Kristen's also trying to get Josh to come out of like this depression mode as well. And so there's multiple times where she's like going to his house and like trying to pick him up and stuff like that, especially after Brandon passes. So she's kind of in like this hyper fixation mode because she's trying to be everything for everyone. And then she realizes in that moment that Josh has also been trying to be there for her in a way that she needed regarding her conditions and stuff. And so he does end up proposing to her or whatever. But I do really appreciate that whenever she's like, oh my God, I have to call Sloan. And she kind of forgets for a moment that Sloan has just been through probably the worst part of her life. And so, Josh ends up saying like, hey, she doesn't want to be there. She's excited for you. She's glad you're getting married, but she just doesn't want to be there. But then she like bombards into the room and like I don't know what I was picturing, but like it was almost like Weird Barbie off of the Barbie movie
Yeah.
where like her lipstick is like everywhere and hair's all over the place. Like that's
Yep.
just kind of what I was picturing her coming in as. But I really appreciated no matter how she looked and honestly probably how horrible this photos probably will look in the future of her being there as one of the witnesses. I appreciated that she was really there and she was, there for her even though it was one of the worst moments of her life. So
Yeah, I can't imagine the difficulty in just even getting up to get there and then sit through it too after what just happened. And I wanted to read this quote. It's way back, but it's just Josh talking about Kristen, and I just love the way he talks about her. And he said, "This crisis had laid everything bare. I'd found my person. She was the foundation. She was the thing that all other things are built on. Everything was secondary to being with her. It didn't matter where I worked or if I liked my job, where I lived, or how many kids I had. My happiness, my sanity, my well being, it all started with her. And now that I knew that, I didn't want to just be her boyfriend. I wanted everything. I wanted her to be my wife, and I wanted to wake up to her every day for the rest of my life." Like, he's sure so sure of himself and so sure of her. And like later on, like she talks about, do you like want an easy woman or whatever? And he's like, I don't want an easy woman. I want you. Don't you get that? You are perfect to me. I feel like a better man just knowing that I can do anything for you, make you lunch, make you laugh, take you dancing. These things feel like a privilege to me. All those things that you think are flaws are what I love about you. Look at me. I'm miserable. I'm so effing miserable without you. And it's just such like, I don't know. I feel like in general, like men are scared to like discuss their feelings really, honestly. Like we've made it such a big deal for men to show emotions. And by
yeah,
we I say men, honestly. But
society.
yeah, society in general, but men created that system, so really it's your own friends. But anywho, and I just think that it was so refreshing to sort of get a character in this book that wasn't that way, wasn't that toxic masculinity. Now, whether someone like him really exists or not is obviously a different question, but I loved it. And honestly, this Josh is probably up there with like Atlas in my book boyfriend
Mhm.
categories for romance wise.
Absolutely.
I mean, like I loved him. I love the way he handled everything. I love the like it was just he was perfect. Obviously, it was fictional, but yeah, like
Absolutely.
he did everything exactly the way that I would have wanted him to do it. Even if I was Kristen,
Mhm.
even if I was being stubborn and whatever else, like love that. Also, I do sort of resonate with Kristen a little bit, so I appreciate that you picked up on that as well.
Yep. Especially the wittiness is a lot similar.
Thanks.
So we end up finding out at the end that after their wedding, they go to the doctor's office to go through the pre-op for the hysterectomy, and the doctor comes in and tells her that they're unable to perform that, which she immediately goes to cancer, something horrible. And turns out it's because she's actually 4 months pregnant, and she had actually gotten pregnant the first night that they had been together. And so it ends up forward into 2 years later, and Kristen and Josh are actually dropping their son off all over Brandon at Evelyn's house. And was Oliver her brother's name? Because I know she
Oliver's
talked about being a twin.
Oliver's the
I didn't know if
son.
Oliver came from something.
I don't remember, but I don't think her brother was named because her brother passed, I think, early on in the womb. But
Okay.
I could be wrong.
I was just curious where they had gotten Oliver from.
Yeah.
But they end up dropping their son off at Evelyn's house, and apparently she had kind of stepped up, which I guess Kristen had also mailed her a potato to basically say, "Hey, I got married and I'm also pregnant." And so she has done that and kind of stepped up. I guess she had helped hire some nannies, during her time. Then apparently she'd also helped represent Sloan whenever she was in a fight for the Brandon's part of the house. And so she did end up having a hysterectomy after they had tried a couple more times to have kids, but she had talked about, maybe trying, in the future to do IVF again and stuff like that. And Josh ends up saying, like, I'm okay with giving her a break on that. Like, I think my entire perspective has changed, that I'm happy just, the way our family is. So,
Which I also really loved, because if we had come back to like him still pushing for more babies, I think it would have ruined the entire aspect of him being okay. Like, you know what I mean?
yeah.
So I really like
Yeah.
that's how he ended it. And I love like the author has a note at the end of the book that talks about her friend who this book is based on and who struggled with her infertility and actually was able to have two children even after struggles. And like I love that it's acknowledged that Oliver is a miracle. Like that this was a fluke. Like it was literally against all odds, because I don't want it to like
Yeah.
that way it doesn't set this sort of like expectation that these women may have these issues, but like they're still possible to have like we need to be
Yeah.
realistic about these things. And honestly, we would need to be doing more research and more awareness, but don't get me started onto that. Because I could rant for days. But anywho, but I like that we acknowledge that and we come back to it so that it's clear she didn't make this up in her head. She wasn't the one that said she couldn't have babies. A doctor told her that, and somehow, by a miracle, ended up being able to have a child, and then continued to struggle after that, trying to get pregnant again. So like, it's not a one in,
Yeah.
it's not a oh you get the first one now you can have 10 more or whatever. Like it is a struggle, and this is honestly the first book I think that I've read that um has been like an accurate depiction of. It didn't really say it was PCOS, but it's I feel like it was very similar. Several symptoms that were the same. And then the tumors on top of that. I don't know if tumors are a symptom of PCOS or not, but like all of that
Cis are.
cysts. So all of that sort of built together, and like endometriosis and those sort of things that women deal with. This was like the first book I think I've read that was like pretty accurate and a fair representation of that. I feel like most of the time it gets like the woman in the story explains what's happening, and then it gets kind of like brushed off or ignored or whatever. Like in reality it does.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I just felt like this was a good representation of it.
Absolutely. I agree.
It was refreshing.
So, what is your final thoughts and ratings?
Okay, so I actually really enjoyed this book. I think it's a good little like romance palette cleanser. If someone was looking for it, I would recommend it. It's not probably one that I'll like reread a dozen times, but it was super cute. I actually surprisingly didn't have that many complaints about it, other than the language used for some of the sex scenes were a little weird. But other than that, I really enjoyed it. So I would actually give this book a 4.7. And again, just a preface for my ratings, I literally decide on the spot. I don't compare it to other books when I do the number, so it might not make sense in the context if I were to rank books. I have no system because I don't really rate with numbers, but for the purpose of the podcast, we do, so I try to go along with it. But what is your rating?
So, to preface mine, I rate start at a 3 and then go back or forward depending on the situation. So, I did like it. It's not my favorite of her books, but it's good. I wouldn't say this is like my first recommendation if I was going to recommend a romance, but I definitely think it was really, a decent kind of palate cleanser. It had kind of different emotions. I felt it really gave more of an educational perspective, like you were saying, with like endometriosis and like women's struggles with like menstruation and stuff like that. And then kind of, if men decided to read it, their what they could do to kind of help out in those situations, I felt was a good
Yeah.
education. But I don't want to say it's like my favorite of all time, but it definitely was good. So I would say it's probably about a 4. Man, probably 4.4. It was decent and it was good. I didn't have a lot of complaints about it, but it wasn't just like, oh my God, I have to recommend it to everybody at the same time. It was okay. There was a couple moments where I got teary eyed, and there's a couple moments where, I felt like, really like he was empowering her and kind of motivating her and stuff like that. I have to say probably the biggest thing that I related to was her OCD like cleaning obsession. It was a little triggering for me personally a little bit, but I think it just overall it was a good book. But 4.4 I think is where it would probably about stand.
Okay. All right. I can appreciate that. I gotta pull up the page again. Somehow I got out of it. Okay. All right. So if you liked this episode or any other episode, please subscribe to get access to bloopers, extra content, and more on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Patreon, YouTube, and just about every other platform that you can listen to podcasts on. Our regular episodes will still be free, but make sure that you subscribe if you want access to the extra content.
You can also send us book suggestions, comments, or general inquiries to our email at likewereadthem at Karl with a K and podcast.com. Our new release schedule will be bi-weekly on Fridays and will include random bonus episodes and things in between. These bonus episodes will be subscription based and may include arcs, games, theories, additional books, Marvel reviews, and more. We also hope to bring you guys more content on Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok with this new schedule as well. You'll also get early access to our next book in our episodes if you tune in to the end for each of them. And if everyone else will find out on Sundays when our social media announcement.
Okay, so our next episode will air on September 20th, and we'll be discussing The Nightingale by Kristen Hanna. I'm going to read the little excerpt from the book. It's a little long, so bear with me. France, 1939. I gotta be honest, this is a historical fiction and I'm a little nervous. It's gonna be my first one. But okay, so in the quiet village of Caraval, I'm sorry if I butcher these names, Vianne Mauriac says goodbye to her husband, Antoine, as he heads for the front. She doesn't believe that the Nazis will invade France, but invade they do in droves of marching soldiers and caravans of trucks and tanks and planes that fill the skies and drop bombs upon the innocent. Vianne's home, she and her daughter must live with the enemy or lose everything. Without food or money or hope, as danger escalates all around them, she is forced to make one impossible choice after another to keep her family alive. Vianne's sister, Isabel, is a rebellious 18-year-old searching for purpose and all the reckless passion of youth. While thousands of Parisians march into the unknown terrors of war, she meets Gaetan, a partisan who believes the French can fight the Nazis from within France, and she falls in love as only the young can, completely. But when he betrays her, Isabel joins the resistance and never looks back, risking her life time and again to save others. With courage, grace, and powerful insight, best-selling author Kristen Hanna captures the epic panorama of World War II and illustrates an intimate part of history seldom seen, the Women's War. The Nightingale tells the stories of two sisters separated by years and experience, by ideals, passion, and circumstance, embarking on her own dangerous path toward survival, love, and freedom in German occupied or torn France. A heartbreakingly beautiful novel that celebrates the resilience of the human spirit and the durability of women. It is a novel for everyone, a novel for a lifetime. So, thank you for tuning into this episode, and we can't wait to hear your thoughts. We also hope you tune in next week. As always, we promise to Carl 'em like we read 'em.
Damn so.